what are we looking for when we engage in the search for meaning?
So when I'm talking about meaning, I'm talking about what's called meaning in life, not the meaning of life. That's some sort of metaphysical claim. Meaning in life are those factors that make people rate their lives as more meaningful, worth living, worth the suffering that they have to endure. And when you study that, what you see is it's a sense of connectedness, connectedness to yourself, to other people, to the world, and a particular kind of connectedness. You want to be connected to things that have a value and an existence independent of your egocentric sort of preferences and concerns. This is why, for example, having a child is considered very meaningful, because you're connecting to something that's going to have a life and a value independent of you. Now, the question that comes up for me, well, there's two questions. One is, why is that at risk right now? And then secondly, and I think you have to answer the second question first, which is, well, yeah, but why is meaning so important? Why is this sense of connectedness so important to human beings? Why, when it is lacking, do they typically fall into depression, potentially mental illness, addiction, self-destructive behavior? And so the first answer I give you is, well, it's that sense of connectedness. And people often express it metaphorically. They want to be connected to something larger than themselves. They want to matter. They don't mean it literally. I mean, if I chained you to a mountain, you wouldn't thereby say, oh, now my life is so fulfilling, right? So what they're trying to convey, they're using this metaphor to try and say they want to be connected. They want to be connected to something real. They want to make a difference and matter to it. And one way of asking them, well, what's meaningful is, tell me what you would like to continue to exist even if you weren't around anymore. And how are you connected to it, and how do you matter to it?
That's one way of trying to get at what is the source of meaning for you. Is if you were no longer there, you would like it to continue existing. That's not the only part of the definition, probably, because there's probably many things that aren't source of meaning for me that maybe I find beautiful that I would like to continue existing.
Yes. If it contributes to your life being meaningful, you're connected to it in some way, and it matters to you, and you matter to it in that you make some difference to it. That's when it goes from being just sort of true, good, and beautiful to being a source of meaning for you in your life.
Is the meaning crisis a new thing, or has it always been with us? Is it part of the human condition in general?
That's an excellent question. And part of the argument I made in Awakening from the Meaning Crisis is there's two aspects to it. One is that there are perennial problems, perennial threats to meaning. And in that sense, human beings are always vulnerable to despair. The book of Ecclesiastes is, it's all vanity, it's all meaningless. But there's also historical forces that have made those perennial problems more pertinent, more pressing, more difficult for people to deal with. And so the meaning crisis is actually the intersection of perennial problems, finding existence absurd, experiencing existential anxiety, feeling alienated, and then pressing historical factors, which have to do with the loss of the resources that human beings have typically cross-historically and cross-culturally made use of in order to address these perennial problems.
Is there something potentially deeper than just a lack of meaning that speaks to the fact that we're vulnerable to despair? Ernest Becker talked about in his book Denial of Death about the fear of death and being an important motivator in our life. As William James said, death is the worm at the core of the human condition. Is it possible that this kind of search for meaning is coupled or can be seen from the perspective of trying to escape the reality, the thought of one's own mortality?
Yeah, Becker and the terror management theory that have come out of it. There's been some good work around sort of providing empirical support for that claim. Some of the work not so good.
So which aspects do you find convincing? Can you steel man that case, and then can you argue against it?
So what aspects I find convincing is that human finitude, being finite, being inherently limited, is very problematic for us. Uh,
Given the extensive use of the word problematic, I like that you use that word to describe one's own mortality as problematic. Because people sort of on Twitter use the word problematic when they disagree with somebody. But this, to me, seems to be the ultimate problematic aspect of the human condition is that we die and it ends.
I think I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm trying to get you to consider that your mortality is not an event in the future; it's a state you're in right now. That's what I'm trying to. That's what I'm trying to shift. Um, so your mortality is just a. We talk about something that causes mortality fatal,
Yes.
but what we actually mean is it's full of fate. And I don't mean in the sense of things that are pre-written. What I mean is the sense of the universe doesn't care about your personal narrative. You can just have met the person that is going to be the love of your life. It's the culmination of your whole project for happiness. And you step into the street and a truck hits you and you die. That's mortality. Mortality isn't just some far flung event, it's that every moment we are subject to fate in that way. So you can think of lots of little deaths you experience whenever all the projects and the plans you make come up against the fact that the universe can just roll over them.
So death is the indifference of nature of the universe to your existence. And so in that sense it is always here with us.
Yeah, but you're vulnerable in so many ways other than just the ending of your biological life. Because it's interesting, if you rate what people fear most, death is not number one. They often put public speaking as number one
Yeah.
because the death of status or reputation can also be a profound loss for human beings. It can drive them into despair.
So, as the terror management folks would say, as Ernest Becker would say, that a self-report on a survey is not an accurate way to capture what is actually at the core of the motivation of a human being. That
Sure.
we could be terrified of death, and we've from childhood, since we realized the absurdity of the fact that the ride ends, we've learned to really try to forget about it, try to construct illusions that allow us to escape momentarily or for prolonged periods of time the realization that we die.
Okay,
Yeah.
so first I took it seriously,
Yeah.
but now I want to say why there's some empirical work that makes me want to reconsider it. So terror management theory is you do things like you give people a list of words to read, and in those lists are words associated with death,
Yes.
coffin, funeral, and then you see what happens to people. And generally, they start to become more rigid in their thinking. They tend to identify with their worldview. They lose cognitive flexibility. That's if you present it to them in that third person perspective. But if you get them to go in the first person perspective and imagine that they're dying and that the people that they care about are there with them, they don't show those responses. In fact, they show us an increase in cognitive flexibility, an increase in openness. See, so I'm trying to say we might be putting the cart before the horse. It might not be death per se, but the kind of meaning that is present or absent in death that is the crucial thing for us.
By the way, to push back, I don't think you took it seriously. I don't think you truly steel manned the case because you're saying that death is always present with us, yes, but isn't there a case to be made that it is one of the major motivators? Nietzsche, will to power, Freud, wanting to have sex with your mother, all the different explanations of what is truly motivating us human beings. Isn't there a strong case to be made that this death thing is a really damn good, um, if not anything, a tool to motivate the behavior of humans?
I'm not saying that the avoidance of death is not significant for human beings, but I'm proposing to you that Human beings have a capacity for considering certain deaths meaningful and certain deaths meaningless. And we have lots of evidence that people are willing to sacrifice their biological existence for a death they consider meaningful.